You wonder, why is it that Paul addresses first women? In that culture and in our culture, we first say Mr. and Mrs. who? It's Mr. and Mrs. And in that culture, it was the same thing. The man in the social context always was addressed first. And the Spirit in here, for a reason that we will understand later on, begins to address the woman. Wives, be submissive unto your own husbands. And then notice what he says. Notice, I'm reading verse 22. Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you what? Read it for me, please. As you do to what? As you do to the Lord. See, what we need to understand is this, okay? The submission that Paul is talking about is not an absolute submission to men. Ultimately, we are all under the lordship of Christ. There is none above that. It is the Lord, His lordship, and then all of us under. That's the reason, be submissive one to another. We all are submissive toward the Lord. And the woman in here is appealed to that, as you are submissive unto the Lord. You see? But he begins by addressing the woman. And in other places he tells us why. It was because who sinned first? The woman. And there are reminders throughout the scriptures about the fact that the woman sinned first. And this is a reality that, my dear sisters in Christ, you need to bear with patience and humility, and understanding and accepting that the scriptures has all around you when you have a child and you go through that horrible pain. It's a reminder of your participation in sin. When you see an unsaved husband mistreating so horribly, so demeaning the wife, you remember that it is because of woman's participation in sin. And Paul brings that again and again, that it was woman who sinned first, and then Adam. And accepting the lordship of Christ implies accepting that truth. So it is because of the fact that you were the first one to participate, you first experienced the experience of sin, and the Spirit does not want us to forget that. That's the reason Jesus put it there first. That's the idea behind it. Now, remember this. The lordship of the husband is not absolute. We must understand this, and now we're coming to that, okay? It has its limits. And the limit is given in the scriptures. When somebody asks us to do something that is contrary to the obvious will of God, what do we say? We must obey whom?
Obey God.
God rather than man. And there are two examples for this. Remember remember Abraham and Sarah? Well, there are two examples that give us this understanding. Remember, in the first account, it was Abraham. He was going to Egypt. There was a famine. So let's go to Egypt for this food. And what this rascal is telling his wife, we are going to lie. You tell them, and I know that Christians find a way of rationalizing, they were actually relatives. No, it was a lie. It's the impression they wanted to cause on the people that were going to hear this story. At that point, the woman should have said, you know what? It's not right for us to lie. Let's throw ourselves in the hands of God. They don't kill you if we trust in God. And that's what we should do. And then you turn around, and a few years later on, it's Sarah. The promise, there is no way, I'm so old. Why don't you take my... You see?